He followed her. She drove 6 hours through the night to escape him, packed one bag, left while he was sleeping, told nobody where she was going. And 2 weeks later, he was standing in a parking lot in her grandmother's town, holding her favorite flowers, wearing his softest voice, touching her wrist like he had every right in the world. Her body locked, her throat closed. 6 hours and he still found her. But what Derek did not see, what he did not account for, was the man standing 2 rows back in that parking lot who had been watching since the moment Samantha's car pulled into that lot. A man who had known her since she was 16. A man who had never once stopped paying attention. He walked up beside her, took the bags from her hands, and said 4 words in a voice so calm it moved the entire situation without raising a single thing. Derek left, but he checked into a bed and breakfast 2 blocks away that same night. And what he did next, to her, to the man beside her, to her own mother, will make your blood run cold.
Chapter 1. The engine was still running. Samantha hadn't turned it off yet. She wasn't ready. She sat behind the wheel of her 2019 Honda Civic with both hands gripping it so tightly her knuckles ached, staring at the small yellow house on Cleary Street like it might disappear if she blinked. Her sunglasses were still on. It was 9:30 at night. Maplewood, Ohio smelled exactly the same. That was the first thing that hit her, before the sight of the house. Before the sound of anything, the smell. October air carrying cut grass and chimney smoke and something faintly sweet she could never name but had always associated with coming home. She had forgotten that smell existed. 6 years in Chicago had replaced it with exhaust fumes and coffee shops and the particular cold of does not care whether you're okay or not. She was not okay. The porch light above Nana Bet's front door swung slightly in the wind, casting a slow, lazy arc of yellow across the front steps. The screen door was the same one. The crack in the second porch step was the same one. The old iron mailbox that read Rivers in faded block letters, still there, still slightly crooked, still doing absolutely nothing about it. Samantha pressed her lips together and looked in the rearview mirror. One suitcase in the back seat. Just one, because she had packed the second one and then stood in the middle of her Chicago apartment at 2 a.m. and decided she was leaving before she finished. Before she changed her mind, before he came back, she turned the engine off. She sat for another full minute anyway. The wind picked up and the porch light swung again, and somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and stopped. Maplewood was quiet the way Chicago never was. A deep, thick quiet that felt like being wrapped in something. She had hated that quiet at 18. She had called it suffocating. Standing water. A town with no ambition and no future and nothing to offer a girl with plans. She was 28 now. She had run out of plans. She got out of the car. The cold hit her immediately, and she pulled her jacket tighter with one hand, the other carrying the strap of her bag. She walked up the path slowly, each step deliberate, like the ground might not hold her. She had her sunglasses on in October, at night. She did not take them off. She raised her hand to knock, and the door opened. Nana Bette was 71 years old, 4 feet 11 inches tall, and had the eyes of a woman who had seen everything and forgotten nothing. She stood in the doorway in her housecoat and her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and she looked at her granddaughter standing on the porch with one bag and sunglasses on at night, and she did not say a single word. She reached out and took the sunglasses off Samantha's face. Gently, the way you handle something that might break. She looked at what was underneath. Still nothing. Not a gasp. Not a question. Not what happened or who did this or I told you so. Just Nana Bette's eyes going soft in a way that said she already knew, had probably known before Samantha even called 3 days ago, and had spent those 3 days cooking and praying and getting the back bedroom ready. She stepped aside. Samantha walked in. The house smelled like sweet potato and pine cleaner and the specific warmth of somewhere that has been lived in and loved in for 40 years. Samantha stood in the small hallway and felt something in her chest do something she could not explain and did not want to look at directly. Nana Bette locked the door behind them. both locks. Samantha slept that night with every single light on. The bedroom light, the hallway light, the bathroom light, the small lamp on the bedside table. She lay on top of the covers, still dressed, one hand curled under her cheek, and stared at the ceiling of the room she had slept in every summer until she was 17. The glow-in-the-dark stars she had stuck up there at 13 were still there, faded now, barely visible, still holding on. She did not sleep for a long time. At some point, close to midnight, she turned her head toward the window. The curtain was thin and the street was visible. Cleary Street, empty and still. Except, across the street, the dry cleaning shop on the corner had a light on. Not the neon sign. That was off. The light inside, warm and low, like someone working late. A shadow moved behind the glass. Slow, deliberate, someone arranging something on a rail or folding something at the back counter. Samantha watched it for a moment. Then she turned back to the ceiling. She did not think about who it was. She was too tired to be curious about anything that was not a threat. She closed her eyes. The light across the street stayed on. If you have ever had to drive home in the dark because there was nowhere else left to go, this story is for you. Subscribe and hit the bell, because what happens next will have your jaw on the floor. Drop where you are watching from in the comments below and stay close, because someone is already watching Samantha settle back into Maplewood. And it is not who you are going to think. Chapter 2. The Bible was open on the kitchen table when Samantha came downstairs the next morning. Isaiah 43:18. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. Nana Beth was at the stove with her back turned, humming something low and church-like, the sweet potato pie already on the counter, even though it was 7 in the morning. She did not explain the verse. She never explained her verses. She just left them open and let you find yourself in them, which Samantha had always found equal parts comforting and invasive. She sat down at the table and pulled her sleeves down. "Pie for breakfast?" she asked. "I made eggs too," Nana Beth said, not turning around. "Sit down before you fall down." Samantha almost smiled, almost. She sat in the same chair she had sat in every morning of every childhood summer, the one closest to the window, the one with the slightly wobbly leg that nobody had fixed in 30 years, and she wrapped both hands around the mug of coffee Nana Beth set in front of her without being asked, and she looked out at Cleary Street, waking up slowly in the grey October morning. She was brilliant. That was the thing people always said first about Samantha Rivers, and the thing she had slowly stopped believing about herself over the last 3 years. She had graduated top of her class from Ohio State, moved to Chicago at 22 with $200 and a job offer, and built herself into a senior marketing executive at one of the city's most competitive agencies by 26. She had a sharp tongue, a faster mind, and the ability to walk into any room and own it within 5 minutes. She also wore long sleeves in August. She over-explained herself in conversations that did not require explanation. She apologized for taking up space. She had learned to read the temperature of a room the way other people read weather, constantly, anxiously, always preparing for a storm. She had bold lipstick on right now. Deep red. Armor. Her phone buzzed on the table. She turned it over without looking and pushed it toward the edge. She already knew who it was. She had 17 unread messages and 4 missed calls she had not touched since crossing the Ohio state line. At 9:15, the phone rang with a contact she actually answered. She picked up. "Baby." Her mother Linda's voice, warm and careful, in the specific way of someone who has rehearsed what they are about to say. "Are you settled? Are you okay? I've been worried sick." "I'm fine, Mom." "Because I was talking to Derek yesterday." Samantha went very still. "He called you?" "He's worried about you, Sam. He says you left without any real conversation, that you were upset, and he thinks if you two just sat down and—" "Mom, I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying." "Mom." Samantha's voice was flat and quiet. That was the voice she used now when she needed to hold herself together. The loudness had been trained out of her somewhere around year 2 of the relationship. "I have to go." She hung up and sat with the phone face down in her hand for a moment. Nana Beth put a plate of eggs in front of her and sat down across the table and folded her hands and said absolutely nothing. Samantha thought about the 17 unread messages. She thought about the night she packed the one suitcase. She thought about the specific sound of a door slamming in an apartment where there was nowhere to go that was far enough away. She picked up her fork and ate her eggs. She had been 23 when she met Derek at a rooftop party in River North. He was 30, tall, well-dressed, the kind of man who made you feel chosen just by looking at you across a room. He laughed at everything she said. He remembered details. He introduced her to his friends, like she was extraordinary. She had been so certain for so long that she had finally found the exact right thing. The first time he raised his voice at her, they had been together 8 months. She had told herself it was stress. The first time he told her she was embarrassing him in public, she had told herself she had been too loud. The first time she changed her clothes because he looked at her outfit with that expression, that quiet, cooling expression. She had told herself she was just being considerate. She had spent 3 years being considerate, shrinking herself down inch by inch until she fit into the shape he needed her to be. Brilliant Samantha Rivers, who could walk into any room and own it, had learned to ask for permission before speaking at dinner parties. She never talked about that part. Outside the window, across the street, the door to the dry cleaning shop opened. Samantha looked up without meaning to. He was taller than she remembered, broader in the shoulders. He was wearing a dark jacket and carrying a set of keys, and he bent down to put a small dish of something on the ground, and an orange cat materialized from nowhere and started eating from it. He straightened up and looked up and down the street the way you do in a small town, not checking for danger, just acknowledging the morning, and then he went back inside. Samantha stared at the spot where he had been standing. "Is that?" she started. "Hajun?" Nana Bet said pleasantly, cutting a slice of sweet potato pie. "He took over his daddy's shop after Mr. Seo passed, 4 years ago now. Good boy. Brings me soup when I'm sick." Samantha looked at the orange cat finishing its breakfast on the front step of the dry cleaning shop. She had named that cat, or a cat exactly like it. She had named it Biscuit at 16 because it was round and orange and showed up on that same step every morning, and she fed it crackers from her school lunch. She was still staring when her phone buzzed again. This time it was a contact that made her exhale with actual relief. "I heard you were back. I'm coming over with a casserole and you cannot stop me." Cora. 20 minutes later, Cora Williams-Baptiste arrived at the door with a full casserole dish, twins on her hip, and absolutely zero ability to regulate her volume. She handed the casserole to Nana Bet without breaking eye contact with Samantha, pulled her into a hug so tight it almost hurt, and then held her at arm's length and looked at her face with the very specific expression of a woman who wanted to ask 100 questions and was, for once, choosing not to. Then Cora looked past Samantha's shoulder toward the window, toward the dry cleaning shop across the street. "Girl," Cora said slowly, "don't." "Is that Hajun so?" "Cora, he got fine." Cora turned to look at her fully, eyes wide. "Sam, he got very fine. When did that happen? How long has he been that fine? Why did nobody tell me he was that fine?" "He's just a neighbour," Samantha said. Nana Betty from the kitchen made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a comment, but landed somewhere between both. Samantha did not look back toward the window, but across the street, just once, Hajun Seo looked toward Nana Bet's house. At the upstairs window, specifically, where a lamp was still on from the night before because the woman sleeping in that room had not turned it off. He looked for just a moment, then he went back to work. Chapter 3, Day 4 was supposed to be simple. Grocery store, 15 items, in and out. Samantha stood in the cereal aisle of Maplewood's only supermarket, holding a box of oatmeal and actually feeling something close to proud of herself. She had driven there alone. She had walked in alone. She had taken a basket instead of a cart because she was only getting a few things, and she had not once stopped to check whether anyone was watching her or following her through the aisles, or tracking what she was putting in the basket and forming an opinion about it. Small, but hers. She paid at the register, and the cashier, a teenager named Brianna with gel nails and a name tag crooked on her vest. Told her she liked her earrings, and Samantha said thank you and meant it. She walked out into the grey October afternoon with 2 bags in her hands and her keys between her fingers, and 4 days of something that felt cautiously like breathing. She was 3 steps from her car when she heard her name. Not hey or excuse me. Her name. Said in a specific tone she had spent 4 days trying to forget. Warm. Careful. The version of Derek's voice he used when he needed something from her. She stopped walking. He was standing beside her car. Not blocking it. Close enough to seem casual, far enough to seem non-threatening. He was holding flowers, yellow ones, the kind she had told him once, very early, were her favourite. He was wearing the grey coat she had bought him for his birthday 2 years ago. He looked good. That was the devastating part. He always looked good. "I've been worried about you," he said. She didn't say anything. "I just want to talk, Sam, 5 minutes. He took 1 step closer and his voice dropped lower, gentler. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be angry. I've been doing a lot of thinking and Derek, her own voice came out flat, small. She hated that. "You didn't even let me explain. You just left." He said it like she had done something impulsive, like she had overreacted to a minor inconvenience. He held the flowers toward her. "I'm not here to fight. I just need you to hear me out. That's all." She knew this version of him. She had loved this version of him once at the very beginning, before she learned that this version was the one he wore right before or right after the other version appeared. This was the version that made her doubt herself, made her think maybe she was the problem, maybe she was too sensitive, maybe she misremembered things. Her hand was on her car door and she could not make herself open it. That was the thing. Nobody told you about it. That your own body stopped working right, that your brain could know exactly what was happening and still send your feet the wrong signals. She stood there, keys in hand, bags cutting into her fingers, and she could not move. He reached out and touched her wrist. Everything in her went completely still. Not calm, still. The way a person goes, still when they are trying very hard not to show fear because they have learned that showing fear makes things worse. Her breath sat in the middle of her chest and did not move, and the grocery bags felt very heavy, and she thought very clearly and uselessly, "Say something." She could not say something. "Hey." The voice came from her left, easy, unhurried, like it was any ordinary afternoon. A hand lifted the grocery bags from her fingers. Both of them, in one motion, light and unbothered. And then Seo Hajin was standing beside her, not in front of her, not between her and Derek, just beside her, with her grocery bags in his hand and his car keys in the other, looking at Derek with an expression that had absolutely nothing aggressive in it, and was somehow still one of the most immovable things she'd ever seen. "You ready?" Hajun said, to her, only to her. That was it. No threat, no puffed chest. Just 2 words that told Derek very clearly that she was not alone, had not been alone, and would not be alone for as long as Hajun was standing there. Derek looked at Hajun. He looked at Samantha. He looked at the flowers in his own hand. Something shifted in his face, the warmth draining out, leaving behind something harder and colder that he covered quickly with a tight smile. "I'll be around," Derek said. To her. Only to her. Then he walked away. Samantha stood very still for another 3 seconds. Then she walked to the passenger side of Harjun's car because her legs had decided that was where they were going, and he unlocked it without a word, and she got in, and he put her bags in the back and got in on the other side and started the engine. He did not ask her if she was okay. He already knew she was not okay. He pulled out of the parking lot and turned onto one of Maplewood's back roads, the long, winding ones that went past the old water tower and the fields that had not been farmed in years. And he drove slowly, and he turned on the radio low, and a Marvin Gaye song came on that she did not know the name of, but recognised in her bones. She cried for 40 minutes. Not quietly, not politely. The kind of crying that had been building behind her chest for 4 days and had found a door finally and walked straight through it. Hajun drove and let the music play and handed her napkins from the glove compartment without looking over, and did not say a single word that required her to respond. When she finally stopped, Her face hurt and she felt hollowed out in a way that was almost relief. "Sorry," she said automatically. "Don't," he said. She looked out the window at the flat Ohio fields going dark in the late afternoon. "How did you know?" she asked. "In the parking lot. How did you know I needed—" "You made that face!" She turned to look at him. "10th grade," he said. "Mr. Patterson used to call on people without warning. You'd go completely still right before. Same face, different reason." He paused. "I was parked 2 rows over. I saw him walk up." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed. It came out before she could stop it, short and surprised and real, the first real laugh in longer than she could remember. Hajun did not laugh. But the corner of his mouth moved. He drove her home as it got dark. He carried her bags to Nanabet's door and handed them to her and went back across the street, and she stood on the porch and watched the light come on inside the dry cleaning shop. Something had shifted. She couldn't name it yet. She wasn't ready to. What she did not know, what she would not find out until Cora called her the next morning with the information delivered at full volume, was that Derek had not checked out of the Cleary Street bed and breakfast 2 blocks away. He had extended his stay by 2 weeks. He was not done with Maplewood. He was not done with her. Chapter 4. The coffee appeared on the first morning. Samantha opened Nanabet's front door at 7:15 to get the newspaper, and there it was. A large cup from Bruised, the specialty coffee place on the other side of Maplewood that she had mentioned exactly once in passing 4 days ago. Oat milk. 2 shots. No sugar. Her order. She stood in the doorway in her housecoat and looked at it. She looked across the street. The dry cleaning shop was open, lights on, her door closed. No sign of anyone. She picked up the coffee and went back inside and said nothing about it to Nanabet, who was already at the kitchen table reading her Bible with the expression of a woman who knew things and was choosing her moment. It happened every morning after that. Same cup, same order. Always there before she came downstairs. She never saw him leave it. She never mentioned it. He never brought it up. They existed in this strange, comfortable agreement to pretend it was not happening. Cora found out on day 3. Cora found it completely unacceptable. "You need to say something," Cora said, sitting at Nanabet's kitchen table with a twin on each knee and her voice pitched at a volume appropriate for a stadium. "That man is driving 40 minutes round trip every morning to bring you coffee, and you're just accepting it silently, like a mysterious Victorian woman?" "I don't want to make it a thing." "It is already a thing, Samantha. It became a thing the second he handed you your groceries and Derek folded like a lawn chair." He was being neighbourly. Cora looked at her for a long time. She said, in a tone that meant the exact opposite. Samantha started going to the shop. She told herself it was because she spotted the filing chaos through the window one morning. 6 years of paper invoices stacked in no discernible order, customer records mixed in with tax documents, a system built entirely on hope and bad habits. It bothered her professionally and personally, and she could not look at it anymore. She told herself that. "You don't have to do this," Hajun said on the first day, watching her set up a sorting system on his back counter with the focus of a woman diffusing something. "I know," she said without looking up. "Hand me that stack." He handed her the stack. Their dynamic established itself within the first hour and never really changed. Samantha talked constantly, out loud, narrating her process, asking questions, filling silence like it was a problem to be solved. Hajun responded in complete sentences that arrived with such precise timing and such unexpected accuracy that she kept stopping mid-sentence to look at him. On the 3rd day, she was explaining a particularly convoluted customer filing situation, and he said, completely straight-faced, "You alphabetize by first name. That's not a system, that's a prayer." She laughed so hard she dropped the folder. She had not laughed like that since before she could remember. Meanwhile, 2 blocks away and 2 weeks into his extended stay, Derek was working. He drove to Linda's house on a Tuesday afternoon with a box of her favourite chocolates and the easy charm that had always made Linda feel seen. He sat in her living room and spoke carefully, not attacking Samantha directly, just painting a picture. "She's been struggling. She's not herself. You know how she gets when she's overwhelmed. He said the word breakdown once, lightly, like he was worried about her, rather than weaponizing it. Linda, who wanted very badly for this situation to resolve itself into something she could explain at church, listened. Samantha called her mother that Thursday and could hear it in Linda's voice immediately, that slight pulling back, that careful neutrality that meant someone else had gotten there first. He seems really concerned about you, Sam. Mom, I'm not taking sides. Whose house did he sit in, Mom? Whose chocolates did he bring? Linda went quiet. Samantha hung up and sat on the back porch steps for a long time with her phone in her lap. The helplessness of it was the worst part. Not the anger. She could work with anger. It was the watching him move through her life, through her people, and being unable to stop it without sounding unhinged, without proving every story he was telling about her. She did not tell Hajun about her mother. What she did not know was that Hajun already knew something was happening. Maplewood was a small town, and small towns talked. Earl, who owned the barber shop on 4th Street and knew everything about everyone within 48 hours of it occurring, had pulled Hajun aside that same week to mention that a man matching Derek's description had been asking around town about the dry cleaning shop. Specifically, about Hajun specifically. Hajun had listened, thanked Earl, and gone back to work. He did not tell Samantha. She was not ready to carry more weight. He filed the information in the place where he kept things he needed to stay calm about and went about his business, which was the thing Samantha slowly started to notice, that he moved through things without performing his reaction to them. He did not broadcast his feelings. He did not use silence as punishment. He was simply steadily there. It was disorienting in the best way. On a Wednesday night after closing up the shop, she sat on the front steps instead of going straight home. The air was cold and sharp, and she could see her breath. Hajun came out, locked the door, saw her sitting there, and sat down beside her without asking why. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then she said, carefully, not looking at him, "I don't trust my own judgment anymore. About people." She paused. "About men. I keep thinking, if I got it that wrong once, how would I even know the difference?" Hajun was quiet for a moment, not the silence of someone forming the right thing to say, the silence of someone who was actually thinking. "That makes sense," he said finally. "You learned from someone who lied about what love looked like. Of course your measuring stick is off. That's not a flaw, that's just damage from a specific source." She turned to look at him. Nobody had ever said it that plainly. Not her therapist in Chicago, not Cora, not Nana Bet with all her verses. Just that plainly. That's damage from a specific source. Like it was simple. Like it was survivable. She went home 20 minutes later and sat on the edge of her bed and cried quietly for a few minutes, and it was not the same kind of crying as the parking lot. This was something releasing, something old and tight finally loosening. She was still thinking about it when Cora texted her at 11 p.m. "Did you know Hajun was engaged 2 years ago?" Samantha sat up straight. "To who?" she typed back. "Don't know. Town went quiet about it real fast. Ended like 3 months before the wedding." "Why did it end?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Ask him yourself." Samantha put her phone face down on the mattress and stared at the ceiling. She did not sleep for a long time. Chapter 5. She found it on a Thursday afternoon. It was tucked behind a box of old customer receipts from 2021, a plain manila folder with nothing written on the outside. She almost set it aside without opening it. She almost moved on to the next stack. She opened it. Medical billing statements, 12 of them, arranged by date spanning 2 years. The name at the top of every single one was the same. Bet Rivers, 14 Cleary Street, Maplewood, Ohio. Samantha stood very still behind the counter and read the first page completely. Then the second. Her grandmother's cardiologist, the follow-up appointments, the medication adjustments, the 2 hospital stays. She had told Samantha were nothing serious, baby, just my pressure acting up. At the bottom of each statement, in the payment reference line, the same name appeared every time. Seo Hajun. She stood there for a long time. Then she walked out from behind the counter to the front of the shop where Hajun was sorting a rack of finished orders. He heard her come up and turned around and looked at her face, and whatever he saw there made him set the hanger down slowly. She held up the folder. He looked at it. He did not look surprised. He did not look caught. "Nana Betty needed help," he said. "Hudgen." Her voice came out thinner than she wanted. "She wasn't going to ask you. You were in Chicago building your life, and she didn't want to be the reason you felt pulled back." He said it plainly, like it was simple math. "I was across the street. I had the money, so I paid it. For 2 years. Yes, without telling anyone. She knew. I told her I'd stop if she told anyone." He paused. "She's family." 2 words. "She's family." Said without weight or performance or any expectation of credit. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Like, of course, you take care of family. Like there was no other possible response to someone you loved needing help. Samantha had spent 3 years with a man who reminded her of every dinner he paid for, who brought up the vacation he planned whenever she was unhappy, like joy was a debt she owed him, who counted his kindness in a ledger and presented the bill whenever it was convenient. 3 years of love that came with terms and conditions she was never shown up front. She felt something crack open in the middle of her chest. She closed the distance between them in 3 steps, grabbed the front of his jacket with both hands, and kissed him. He went completely still, not pulling back, not pushing forward, completely still, giving her the choice entirely, making sure every single inch of what happened next was hers. She felt it, that stillness, and it made her hold on tighter. Then he kissed her back. And it was not desperate or rushed. It was careful and certain, the way a person moves when they have been patient about something for a very long time and are finally allowed to stop pretending. 12 years of almost and never and too late and too far resolved themselves in the small space of the dry cleaning shop on Cleary Street on a Thursday afternoon. When she pulled back, she was shaking slightly. He rested his forehead against hers and neither of them said anything for a moment. "The engagement," she said quietly. "I need to know." He exhaled. He stepped back and leaned against the counter and told her. Her name was Minji. She was his mother's best friend's daughter, chosen carefully, approved thoroughly, a good woman by every measurable standard. He had said yes because everyone needed him to say yes, and he had spent his entire adult life making sure everyone around him was comfortable. 3 months before the wedding, he woke up one morning and could not pretend anymore. He ended it cleanly. Minji had been hurt. His mother had never fully forgiven him. The town had gone quiet about it because nobody quite understood. "I was building a life around what everyone else needed from me," he said. "I forgot to check what I actually wanted." Samantha heard that and felt it land somewhere private. They stayed in the shop talking until it was dark outside. It was the most honest conversation she had in years. She walked home feeling something she hadn't felt in so long she barely recognized it. Light. She felt genuinely, cautiously light. Her phone showed 17 notifications when she picked it up, all from the same source, people tagging her, forwarding a link, adding cry face emojis and question marks. She clicked the link. Maplewood Moments, Rhonda Pascoe's local blog, read by approximately everyone in town over 40 and forwarded by everyone under it. The post was titled, "Prayers for Our Own When City Life Gets Too Hard." It was 3 paragraphs of careful, smiling cruelty. It suggested Samantha had suffered a breakdown. It implied she had been let go from her job. It referenced, delicately, unverified claims of mistreatment that sources close to the situation described as an emotional response to a difficult breakup. Derek had talked to Rhonda. Derek, who knew exactly which doors to knock on in a small town where reputation was currency. By morning, Maplewood had divided into 2 camps. Her phone rang at 8 a.m. Linda. "Baby," her mother said carefully. "I read the article." "Mom, don't." "I'm not saying it's true. I just think..." Linda paused, and the pause lasted 1 beat too long. "I just think there are 2 sides to every story." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Samantha had ever heard. She hung up. She sat on the bedroom floor. She did not cry. At midnight, she was at Hajun's door, still in her day clothes, no lipstick left, jaw set, eyes dry and burning with something past tears. He opened the door, looked at her face, and read every single thing on it. "Come in," he said. She walked past him into the warmth of his living room and heard the door close behind her and thought, I am done running. Not for him. Not for Maplewood. For herself. She was staying. For now. On her own terms. She had no idea everything was about to get so much worse. Chapter 6. It was Cora who called her. Don't panic, Cora said, which was the single worst way to begin any sentence. Hajun is fine, but you need to come to the shop. He was sitting in the back room with a cloth pressed to his lip when she got there. The split was clean, the kind that comes from one direct hit rather than a struggle. His jacket was on the floor. He was very, very calm, which made her less calm. Derek, she said. It was not a question. He was waiting behind the building when I was taking out the trash. Hajun's voice was even. He wanted me to understand that I was making things complicated for myself. He hit you. I didn't move when he told me to. Something went cold inside Samantha. Then it went hot. A very specific kind of hot that she had never felt before. Not the sharp heat of fear or the wet heat of tears, but something low and steady and absolute. She was in Nana Bet's kitchen in 8 minutes flat. The cast iron skillet was on the stove. She picked it up. She was out the front door in 9 minutes. She made it exactly 1 block. Nana Bet, who moved with the speed of a woman powered entirely by the Holy Spirit and decades of managing difficult situations, materialized on the sidewalk in front of her with her Bible in one hand and her house shoe still on one foot. Samantha Louise Rivers. Nana! Move! Not on this street. Nana Bet stepped directly into her path and looked at the skillet and then looked at her granddaughter's face and did not flinch. Not today. Not with that. He put his hands on Hajun. I know what he did. Give me the skillet. Nana, give me the skillet. From across the street faintly came the sound of Cora's voice. I'm filming for safety purposes. A pause. I am absolutely lying about that. Samantha stood on the sidewalk in the cold with the skillet in her hand and her whole body shaking with the effort of not moving forward. And Nana Bet stood in front of her, unmovable and patient, and eventually, slowly, Samantha lowered her arm. Nana Bet took the skillet. She also took Samantha's hand. They stood there on the sidewalk together until the shaking slowed. The next morning, Mrs. Ther arrived. No warning. A taxi from the airport. 1 large suitcase and the expression of a woman who had made a decision and boarded a plane before anyone could talk her out of it. She was 63, sharp-eyed and elegant in the specific way of someone who had spent years making sure everything around her looked exactly right. She saw Samantha coming out of the shop. Her expression said everything. She said nothing. Then she waited until Samantha was gone. Then she sat across from her son in his kitchen and folded her hands and looked at him the way she had looked at him when he ended the engagement, like he was making a mistake she could see clearly and he was refusing to. That girl has chaos following her, she said. Hajun was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. Then you understand why. I'll stand in it with her. He said it simply, without anger, which was somehow more final than shouting would have been. That's my answer, Mom. Mrs. Ther looked at him for a long time. Something moved across her face that she covered quickly. She picked up her tea and said nothing more. 3 days later, an email arrived. Samantha was on the back porch when she read it. Senior Creative Director, Harman & Reed, Chicago. The firm she had applied to 2 years ago and been rejected from. They had an opening. They wanted her. The salary figure made her blink twice. She read it 3 times. She sat with it for 2 days. She thought about Derek still at the bed and breakfast. Rhonda's blog post still sitting online. Her mother's voice saying 2 sides. She thought about being 22 and arriving in Chicago with nothing and building something real from nothing. She thought about how she had come to Maplewood to survive and had not planned on anything beyond that. She thought about Hajun. And that was exactly the problem. She was starting to make decisions around Hajun's presence, and the last time she had shaped her life around a man, it had cost her everything. She could not do that again. She would not survive doing that again. She accepted the offer on a Tuesday morning. Alone. Quietly. She told herself she would tell Hajun that evening. She did not tell him that evening, or the next morning, or the day after that. Nana Bet found the offer letter on the kitchen counter on a Thursday. Samantha came downstairs to find Nanabet at the kitchen table, reading glasses on, the letter in front of her, Isaiah open on the other side. She looked up at her granddaughter with an expression that was not angry and not disappointed, and was somehow worse than both. "When were you going to tell him?" Nanabet asked. "I was going to." "When, Samantha?" She didn't answer. Nanabet picked up her phone, right there at the table. She dialed and held it to her ear and said, when the other end picked up, "Hajun, baby, can you come over?" Samantha said, "Nana?" Nanabet held up one hand and quoted Proverbs 12:17 by memory and at full volume. Hajun arrived in 10 minutes. He came through the front door and looked at Nanabet's face and then at Samantha's face and then at the letter on the table. He picked it up. He read it once. The room was completely silent. He set it back down carefully. He looked at Samantha and she looked at him and she watched him understand. Not just the job offer, but the part that came before it. The 2 days of silence. The decision made alone. The packing that had already started in her head while she was still holding his hand. He had thought she was choosing to stay. She had been planning her exit. He nodded once, slow and quiet. He put his keys back in his pocket. Then he walked out. Chapter 7. He came back. Not that night. That night the house on Cleary Street was quiet in a way that had weight to it, and Samantha sat on the edge of her bed and did not sleep and did not cry and did not do anything except exist inside the specific stillness of someone who has just watched something good walk out the door because of their own hands. He came back the next morning, 7 a.m. He knocked twice. She opened the door and he was standing on the porch with his hands in his jacket pockets and his jaw tight and his eyes carrying something she had not seen in them before. Not anger, not coldness, something more honest than both. "Can we talk?" he said. They walked to the shop. He unlocked it but didn't turn on the main lights, just the back lamp, the one she had come to associate with late evenings and easy conversation, and the person she was slowly becoming again. They stood across the counter from each other, and the silence lasted long enough to mean something. Then Hajun spoke. "I never asked you to stay for me." His voice was low and even, and she could hear, underneath it, the slight shake he was working very hard to control. That shake was worse than any raised voice she had ever heard. "I never asked you to build anything around me or give anything up for me. I just needed you to tell me the truth." He looked at her directly. "I deserved the truth, Samantha." She opened her mouth, closed it. "You were in my shop every day," he said. "You were at my door at midnight. You let me in, and the whole time you were already packing in your head, and I was standing there thinking—" He stopped, pressed his lips together, started again. "I felt like a fool." "You are not a fool." Her voice came out broken at the edges. "Then what was I?" The question sat in the air between them, and she could not answer it with anything easy or soft. She owed him the real answer. She had spent 3 years giving a man the answers that kept the peace, rather than the answers that were true, and it had cost her everything, and she was done. "You were the first person in years who made me feel safe," she said, "and that terrified me more than Derek ever did." Hajun went very still. "Because Derek I understood," she continued. "I knew his patterns, I knew his moods, I knew how to survive him. But you—" She stopped. She pressed her hand flat on the counter because she needed something solid. "I don't know how to stay somewhere without it costing me everything. I don't know how to be in something good and trust that it stays good. I kept waiting for the version of you that I'd have to survive, and it never came, and I didn't know what to do with that." The room went completely quiet. They both understood in that silence that nothing she had just said was about him. It was about 3 years of damage that had rewired something fundamental in her. It was about learning to associate love with threat until she couldn't separate them anymore. It was about being so well trained in leaving before she got hurt that she had started leaving before anything bad even happened. Hajun looked at her for a long moment. "I know," he said quietly. "I know that. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I know that too." But knowing did not fix it. They both understood that as well. He needed time to sit with the hurt and she needed to earn back something she had not even realized she was spending. They did not fix it that morning in the back of the shop. He walked her to the door and she went home, and the distance between Nana Bet's porch and the dry cleaning shop felt much wider than Cleary Street. The town noticed within 48 hours. Small towns always did. Cora showed up at Nana Bet's door with a casserole and red eyes and said absolutely nothing useful and cried for 20 minutes into Samantha's shoulder. Nana Bet began quoting Proverbs at the breakfast table every single morning, a different verse each day. All of them pointed with the precision of a woman who had a specific target in mind. By day 5, Samantha was starting to feel personally prosecuted by the Book of Proverbs. On the 6th morning, her phone rang with a number she did not have saved. "This is Myung-ja Seo," the voice said. "I'd like to meet with you. At the shop. This afternoon, if you can." Samantha almost said no. She went anyway. Mrs. Seo was already there when she arrived, sitting at the small table in the back where Samantha had spent weeks reorganizing files, hands folded, a phone face down on the table in front of her. She looked at Samantha with an expression that had changed since their first silent exchange outside the shop. The judgment was still there, but something else had moved in alongside it. "Sit down," Mrs. Seo said. Samantha sat. Mrs. Seo picked up the phone. She turned it over, opened an audio file, and pressed play. Derek's voice filled the small room. It was from 2 weeks ago, the parking lot of the pharmacy on 4th Street. Mrs. Seo had been in her car when she saw the exchange. She had picked up her phone without thinking, and she had recorded 4 minutes and 12 seconds of Derek saying, in his quiet and controlled and utterly chilling way, exactly what he believed Samantha owed him, and exactly what he intended to do about it if she continued making things difficult. The recording ended. The room was completely silent. "I never trusted his eyes," Mrs. Seo said. "The first time I saw him, something was wrong behind them." Samantha sat with both hands pressed together in her lap and said nothing. Mrs. Seo reached across the table and placed her hand over Samantha's. The gesture was not natural for her. Samantha could feel that, could feel the deliberateness of it. This woman choosing to reach past her own comfort. "My son has his father's heart," Mrs. Seo said. "His father loved me the way I had never been loved before, and I was so afraid of how much I needed it that I kept one foot out the door for years. I wasted years." Her voice stayed steady, but only just. "I was too afraid to let it save me. Don't be me." Samantha looked at this woman who had flown from Korea to stand in her son's life and had arrived with all the wrong tools and was now in this back room offering the only one that actually mattered. She sat with it for a long time after Mrs. Seo left. Then she made 2 calls. The first was to Harmon and Reed in Chicago. She asked for 30 minutes with the hiring director. She explained what she needed. There was a pause, a brief hold, a conversation she could not hear on the other end. Then, yes, remote, with quarterly visits. The role was still hers. The second call was to Hajun. It rang 4 times, then voicemail. She sat with the phone in her hand for a moment. Then she put on her jacket and walked across Cleary Street to the shop. The main lights were off. The closed sign was turned. She knocked anyway. No answer. She stood on the step for a moment in the cold. Then she turned around. The light was on in the house across the street. Nana Bet's porch light, the one that swung slightly in the wind, casting its slow yellow arc across the front steps. Hajun was sitting on the porch steps. He had been there in the cold, and she had not seen him. He was looking at her. He did not call out or wave or make it easy. He just sat there and looked at her and waited. She walked across the street and sat down beside him. Neither of them spoke immediately. Their breath showed in the cold air. The street was empty and quiet, and the porch light swung above them. She was staying. She just needed him to know that she was choosing it this time, fully, with her whole self. She would tell him. But for now, sitting beside him in the cold felt like the first honest thing she had done in a very long time, and she let it be enough for tonight. Chapter 8. Mrs. Seo took the recording to the police herself. She drove to the Maplewood station on a Monday morning, dressed like she was attending something important, which she was, and she sat across from Officer Danielle Webb and played the recording and answered every question asked of her with the clarity of a woman who had made up her mind completely. By Wednesday, Derek was under formal investigation. By Friday, 2 women from Chicago had come forward. Their names were not published. Their statements were. The details in those statements were specific and familiar, and they matched in pattern and in method. Everything Samantha had lived through and been told was her own fault or her own imagination or her own sensitivity. It was not her fault. It had never been her fault. The story moved fast in a small town. By the weekend, Maplewood had stopped dividing and started landing firmly on one side with the particular force of a community that had been misled and did not appreciate it. Rhonda Pascoe took down the blog post on Saturday morning. By Saturday afternoon, she had replaced it with a new one. 3 paragraphs, no title image, no clever wording. Just, I was given false information and I published it without verifying it. I was used by someone I should not have trusted, and in doing so I caused harm to someone in this community who deserved better from me. I am sorry. That is all. It was messy. It was public. It landed exactly the way it needed to. Linda drove to Maplewood on Sunday. She did not call ahead. She pulled up to Nana Betty's house and came to the door, and when it opened, she was already crying. Not the careful, composed crying of someone managing their image, but the ugly, collapsing kind. The kind that meant she had been holding it since Friday and could not hold it anymore. Nana Bay let her in. She sat Linda at the kitchen table and put sweet potato pie in front of her, and sat across from her and did not quote a single verse. She just let Linda cry for as long as she needed to cry. Samantha sat in the doorway of the kitchen and watched her mother fall apart and felt something complicated and true move through her. Not satisfaction, not bitterness. Grief. For the version of this that should have happened differently. For the years of her mother choosing comfort over truth. For the fact that Linda's regret was real and also could not give anything back. Later, Linda held both of Samantha's hands at the kitchen table and looked at her and said, I should have believed you, the first time, without needing proof. She did not try to explain it or soften it. I am sorry. Samantha held her mother's hands and did not rush herself into forgiveness, but she held on. That evening, she went to the shop. It was after hours. The closed sign was up, but the backlight was on, and through the window she could see Hajun moving slowly along the inventory rack, counting orders, making notes on the clipboard he kept on the second hook by the door. He did this when he needed the world to feel orderly. She knew that about him now. She tried the door. He had left it unlocked. She walked in. The familiar smell of clean fabric and the cedar spray he used on the wooden shelving reached her, and she stood just inside the door and waited. He continued down the rack. He was giving her the same thing she had once needed from him. Space to arrive fully before anything was required of her. He finished the row he was on and moved to the next, and she stood in the quiet and warm of the shop and let herself just be there without bracing. Then he stopped. He turned around and looked at her across the length of the shop. She held his gaze. I negotiated remote, she said. Quarterly visits on site. Everything else from here. She let that settle for exactly 1 beat. I'm staying. Another beat. Not because I have nowhere else to go. He recognized his own words. She watched it move through his face, the recognition, and underneath it, everything he had been carrying since the morning he walked out of Nana Bet's kitchen. He set the clipboard down on the nearest shelf. He walked toward her slowly, and she did not move back. He stopped in front of her and raised both hands and held her face the way someone holds something they have been extremely careful with for a very long time. She felt his thumbs against her jaw, and she closed her eyes and leaned into it, and there was no bracing, no waiting for the cost, no calculation running in the background of her mind. Just this, just him, just safe. He pressed his forehead to hers. Okay, he said quietly. From outside, very faintly, came the sound of someone eating chips, then sniffling. Then the unmistakable voice of Cora Williams-Baptiste whispering to absolutely no one. I am not crying. I have allergies. This is medical. She had been at the window for 6 minutes. Nobody acknowledged her. This was the kindest thing anyone could do for her. 3 days later, Derek checked out of the Cleary Street bed and breakfast. He did not say goodbye to anyone. He did not leave a note or a message or a final performance of the version of himself he had tried to convince this town was real. He simply left, the way people leave when the ground has run out from under the story they were trying to tell. Samantha found out from Cora, who found out from Earl at the barber shop, who had watched the taxi pull away himself. She was on Nana Bete's porch with her morning coffee when she heard. She sat with it. She waited to feel something. Relief, triumph, the specific satisfaction of watching someone who hurt you run out of options. What she felt instead was quieter than any of that. A kind of absence. The background noise of dread that had been running underneath every ordinary moment for weeks was simply gone, and the silence where it used to be felt strange, almost empty. She was still sitting with that strangeness when the front door opened behind her and Hajun came out with a second coffee, her exact order, oat milk, 2 shots, no sugar, and sat down beside her on the porch steps and handed it to her without a word. She took it. She looked at it. She looked at him. The empty feeling was not emptiness at all. She understood that now, sitting in the quiet of Cleary Street with coffee in her hands and Hajun beside her and the porch lights still and steady above them. It was just what peace felt like. She had forgotten. She was remembering now. Chapter 9. 6 months later, Maplewood was in the middle of April. The trees on Cleary Street had come back green and the mornings were warm enough that Samantha had moved her entire work setup to Nana Bet's front porch. Laptop, second monitor, the good coffee, and a blanket she stopped needing by 10 a.m. She had a call with a client in Seattle at 9, a campaign review with a team in Miami at 11, and a deadline for a brand launch in New York by end of day. She managed all of it from a wicker chair on a porch in Maplewood, Ohio, in bare feet, with Biscuit, the orange cat, asleep on the step below her. She had not shrunk. She had expanded. She had taken everything she had built in Chicago, the skill, the instinct, the sharp mind that had never actually left her, only been buried, and brought it home with her. The work was better now. She could feel it. Her thinking was clearer. Her ideas had room to breathe. She was sleeping with the lights off. Not all nights, but most. Nana Bet passed through the porch twice an hour with no stated purpose, which was her way of checking on people without admitting she was checking on people. On her third pass, she left a cup of tea beside the laptop without breaking stride and quoted Proverbs 31 under her breath. Samantha smiled at her screen and said nothing. Across the street, the dry cleaning shop was open. She did not watch it the way she used to in those first raw days of October. She did not watch it like it was something she was afraid to want. She watched it the way a person watches something that belongs to their regular, ordinary daily life, with comfort and ease and the quiet pleasure of things being exactly where they are supposed to be. That evening she was getting ready for dinner. Nothing special. Hajun was cooking at his place, the thing he did on Friday evenings when she came over and sat on his kitchen counter and talked too much while he cooked, and he said nothing about how much she was talking and fed her things to taste every 20 minutes. It was her favourite part of the week. It was very ordinary. She loved it completely. She was in the bathroom reaching for her earrings when her elbow caught the glass on the edge of the sink. It fell. It shattered on the tile floor. The sound was sharp and sudden in the small bathroom, and before she had taken a single breath, her whole body had already reacted, shoulders up, chest locked, air stopped somewhere in her throat. She stood completely still over the broken glass with one earring in her hand and her heart hitting hard against her ribs, waiting for the sigh, for the cold silence that walked ahead of everything else. For the voice that made ordinary accidents into evidence of her carelessness, her stupidity, her inability to do anything without creating a problem. She stood there and her body waited for something that was not coming, and she could not make her body understand that yet. Hajun appeared in the bathroom doorway. He had let himself in. She had given him a key 2 months ago in the most casual exchange possible, handing it to him mid-conversation about something else. Both of them pretending it wasn't significant when it was the most significant thing. He looked at the glass on the floor. He looked at her face. He looked at her standing frozen with one earring in her hand and her shoulders at her ears. He understood everything in 2 seconds. He did not say, "It's fine." He did not say, "Don't worry about it," or "It's just a glass," or any of the things that would have required her to perform being okay before she was okay. He crossed to the small closet, got the dustpan, came back, and knelt down on the bathroom floor and started picking up the pieces quietly and carefully. "Hey," he said, without looking up. "You're okay, I've got it." She broke. Not dramatically. She sat down on the edge of the tub and put her face in her hands and cried with the full weight of everything those 5 words meant. Not just tonight, not just this glass, but every version of this moment she had lived through that went differently. Every time she had stood over something small and broken and made herself as invisible as possible and waited to find out how much it was going to cost her. It did not cost her anything. It was a glass. He was on the floor picking it up. That was it. That was all. Hajun finished, put the dustpan aside and sat on the floor with his back against the tub beside her feet. He did not pull her down to him or tell her to stop or remind her they had dinner to get to. He sat on the bathroom floor in his Friday evening cooking clothes and stayed right there and let her take all the time she needed. She slid off the edge of the tub and sat on the floor beside him. He put his arm around her and she leaned into his side and they sat on the bathroom floor of Nana Bet's house for a long time in complete silence. He did not rush her back to okay. He never rushed her back to okay. She thought about Derek. She thought about how love used to feel like constant math. Calculating costs, measuring reactions, managing his comfort at the direct expense of her own. She thought about the woman who used to rehearse sentences before saying them, who apologized for crying, who spent 3 hours redoing her makeup once because someone told her face annoyed him. She did not live there anymore. She was sitting on a bathroom floor being held by a man who had knelt down without hesitation, and all he had said was, "You're okay, and I've got it," and meant both things completely. She was okay, he had it. She wiped her face. She stood up. She finished putting her earring in. He stood up, straightened his shirt, and looked at her in the mirror with the expression she had come to understand meant he thought she was remarkable without requiring her to perform that remarkableness for anyone. "Ready?" he said. "Yes," she said. They had dinner. It was ordinary and warm, and she talked too much, and he fed her things to taste, and the kitchen was full of sound and light, and she laughed twice so hard she had to set her fork down. 3 months later, on a warm July evening, he asked her on the porch. No restaurant, no arranged moment. They had been sitting on Nana Bet's porch steps after a neighborhood cookout, full and comfortable, and he had been quiet for a few minutes in the way he got quiet when he was thinking something through to its end. Then he shifted, and she turned to look at him, and he was on one knee on the porch step, and her heart stopped completely. He looked at her steadily. "I don't want you to stay because you have nowhere else to go," he said. "I want you to stay because this is exactly where you want to be." From inside the house came no sound at all, which meant Nana Bet was at the window and had turned off the television and was holding completely still so she could hear. She had been there, it would later emerge, for 20 minutes, with a slice of pie and her Bible open to Song of Solomon. Samantha said yes before he finished the sentence. She said it clearly, fully, without hesitation or calculation, or the quiet background fear of what saying yes to someone might eventually cost her. She said it like a woman who had made a free choice and knew it. Nana Betty erupted from inside the house like she had been launched. They got married in September, in the backyard of the house on Cleary Street. The house Hudson had quietly purchased 2 years earlier to keep it safe, to keep it in the family, before he had any reason to believe she was coming back. He had just kept the light on, in every sense. Mrs. So stood beside her son before the ceremony and pressed her late husband's ring into his palm without a single word. Her hand shook slightly. He covered it with his own, and they stood together for a moment in the kind of silence that holds everything that cannot be said. Linda stood in the front row in a yellow dress and cried from the moment the music started. Not pretty crying, the kind that meant she understood exactly what she had almost cost her daughter and was living inside that knowledge in real time. Samantha saw her mother's face during the vows and felt the full, complicated weight of forgiving someone who genuinely did not understand the harm they caused until it was almost too late. She had chosen to forgive her, not because it was easy, not because the hurt had disappeared, because she was no longer the woman who stayed small to make other people comfortable. And forgiveness, chosen freely and on her own terms, was the opposite of small. After the ceremony, after the food and the dancing, and Cora making 3 separate speeches that nobody asked for and everyone enjoyed, after Mrs. CO actually laughed at something Nana Bet said, and the 2 women sat together at the garden table like they had known each other for years, Samantha slipped away to the front porch. She stood there barefoot on the warm wood in her wedding dress. Hudgen found her 2 minutes later. He leaned in the doorway and said something low and quiet that was just for her, something that had no business being as funny as it was, and she laughed. Not the polite laugh she had learned to perform, not the careful, measured laugh of someone making sure they were not taking up too much space, a full, complete, head thrown back, whole-body laugh that she did not manage or contain or apologize for. He watched her laugh with the expression of a man who considers himself very lucky and knows it. The porch light was on above them. It was the same light that had been swinging over this porch since before either of them were old enough to understand what they were to each other. It was still slightly crooked. Nobody had fixed it. Nobody needed to. She had come home to survive. She stayed because surviving was only the beginning. If this story touched something in you, if you have ever had to rebuild yourself from the inside out, or if you are still in the middle of that, this one was for you. Like this video and subscribe so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments, what moment in this story hit you the hardest? Was it the parking lot, the bathroom floor, or the porch light that never went off? I read every single one. Drop it below.